Welcome, St. Peter's family, to this second video on the subject of race, racism, and being a diverse church family. In the USA in particular, the Black Lives Matter movement continues to throw a spotlight on the issue of racism. It is, however, not just a news story confined to one country or one ethnic group or one period in time, but is endemic actually all over our world. We as Christians have biblical reasons for rejecting racism, don't we? In creation, all of humanity has been made equally in God's image. There's no gradation, no superiority of one group over another. In salvation, God offers all ethnic groups the same opportunity to come to him by faith in Jesus Christ, to receive the same forgiveness. In the church, God has put people from all ethnic groups, skin colors, and languages together with equal status as adopted children with the same spirit. In the hope of heaven, all have the same hope of a heavenly home in the multicultural, multi-ethnic, multicolored, eternal city. So for a Christian to think that black is better than white, white is better than black, Indian is better than Chinese, or one tribe is better than another is just wrong. And I doubt many of us watching this video would hold such views. However, while we would often, or always hopefully, reject overt racism, often we do find similar attitudes in a kind of a seed form hidden deep in our hearts. There is sometimes a sense of cultural supremacy of our own culture, which we do actually carry with us. There's sometimes that sense that which can be quite subtle actually, but sometimes it's there where I think that I respect others and their cultures, but deep down I think my culture is best. And so I'm quick to judge other groups' behaviors while excusing my own. Deep down I think that my tribe's way of doing things is best and better than other people. And we're the best people maybe. This, like I say, is a global problem. We see it everywhere. We have probably all experienced it at some level, somewhere. And like I say, often we will see it in our own hearts. Positively, we want our church to be what God has made us and saved us to be. That is a diverse, united community formed and shaped by the gospel of his Son and by our God who has created us in our diversity and put us together to be united. So today, as you can see, we've gathered a few members of the church family who have lived or currently do live in a culture which is not their first culture, not the one that they grew up in. And we're going to be talking about living in a different culture, this cultural superiority that we sometimes see, and we're going to talk about the church. So if we could start off, guys, by just introducing ourselves, and how would you describe your kind of cultural background, your ethnicity? Can we start with Bayo?
My name is Bayo Oyelese, and I would describe myself as Nigerian. I would like to think I'm Nigerian, although within Nigeria we have different ethnic groups, and if you want to dig deeper, then I am Yoruba, but I see myself as Nigerian. And I spent most of my formative years in Nigeria.
Great, thank you. Arta?
You introduced me. My name is Arsa, and my name is Arsa, and I am from Albania. I think I can describe my culture as a very welcoming. We chat quite a lot. We love chatting, and we like asking lots of questions. So if we meet someone for the first time, I can say with confidence that the first 5 minutes we will know pretty much everything about the other person. So yeah.
Thank you. And lastly, we have?
So I'm Joy, with the complicated surname, Hui Narimas, Hui being Chinese and Narimas coming from my Namibian husband. I was born in Singapore, but I grew up in the UK. And I spent from about 1987 to 2015 working in different countries, including Sudan, Brunei, Namibia. I regard myself as British, but obviously ethnically Chinese.
Great. So like you see, a range of different experiences of living in different cultures. Now, when I first went to live overseas, I've lived overseas for 6 years of the last 10, a more experienced missionary told me culture shock is not really about being shocked about someone else's culture, but the shocking realization that we ourselves actually have a culture. Sometimes when you've grown up within a culture, you don't realize that it's even there. But when you're taken out of your own culture and then you look back, you can see, oh yeah, I did grow up in a culture and I've internalized it, and it can be a shock. I wonder if anyone's had that experience, and can you remember maybe a personal story when you realized that you yourself had a culture and it was different to others?
I'm happy to share that. Well, I lived in Greece as well, but when kind of Greek culture and Albanian culture are quite, I can say, similar to each other. So there is no big difference on that. But when I first came to England, and then I was invited to this posh birthday party, and then I found myself there. And then I realized at the end that I had to pay. I had to pay for my own stuff. And like, what? I wasn't sure if I had enough money with me. No, because I didn't have money to pay. But in my culture is if it is my birthday and I invite someone for my birthday, then I have to pay for them. So for me, then I realized, yeah, I like culture. So I don't try to see the differences, but I think that hits me then, that, wow, it's so different. And I think, and the other time when it hits me that I have a culture is when I went back home. I had realized only then that how different the differences and how different I was, and I couldn't fit anymore in my own culture because I had changed and they had changed. So is that, yeah, it's more like going back home that realize that I'm different. I've lived in a different culture, and it's amazing how without knowing we adapt those, we take these, yeah, habits from another culture and we make it our own.
Yeah, thanks, Arthur.
I think my own personal experience growing up in Nigeria, I'd had exposure to other cultures from primary school, secondary school, to even working life. So met people and grew up, made friends with people from different parts of the world, from Australia, from Britain, America, Canada, and even France and Belgium. And I always sort of felt I had a good understanding of other cultures, but all I had really was a broad, basic understanding. And so when I moved into the UK in the late 80s, and I started to build more closer relationship and appreciation of other cultures, then I started to understand. I have a quite similar experience as Arthur, in the sense that I was part of a marriage course when I was preparing to get married, and built up a relationship with a Scottish guy and his fiancée then, and then got married. And they invited us to their wedding, and we went for the wedding. We got the wedding presents and everything. And at the end of the church service, we were told, well, you're not actually invited to the reception. So that was a shock for me. And we sort of stood there. We thought, what are we going to do with the present? Because I was sort of worried about that. And I sort of got to start to understand a little bit more about the cultures. Because in my culture, when you had a wedding or any ceremony of any kind, everybody was invited. You didn't even have to tell them.
Yeah.
They just rocked up, you know?
Yeah. Joy, have you anything that springs to mind?
I think the thing that contrasts when I go to different places is just I've got a very British Western attitude to time, and I think other cultures have a very flexible view of time sometimes, and that's a real clash sometimes when you have a meeting at 8 o'clock and other people think 8:30 is okay to rock up, and with my Western view that's not okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
But That is a Western view.
That leads us quite nicely actually into our next thing. Because one of the big cultural differences around the world is the idea of politeness and rudeness. Because right and wrong, you know, we would affirm that right and wrong are not invented by humans, they are invented by God and they're written on our hearts. But the rules about being polite or rude, like turning up on time, are not divine and eternal in the same way, are they? They are culturally defined. But sometimes we think they are kind of eternal and unchanging. So I wonder, guys, can you think of a time when you yourself have maybe come across as rude without meaning to, or when someone did something to you which in your home culture would have been considered rude? Or conversely, if you want to do the positive, examples of politeness which are different in the UK to our first cultures.
My own experience of coming across as rude was, even within a culture, you got a subculture. So I was talking about young people who basically in the 80s, there was a liberal use of 4-letter words and it wasn't seen as rude at all. And I remember bringing that as part of my language when I'm talking to people. And especially in this country, people were looking at me and saying, "You're rude." And I just couldn't get it. And I thought, this is just me communicating. And eventually I started working out that, you know, you just don't say things that it's not politely right. Within a subculture or informal setting, you might be liberal in the use of language, but you need to watch that. Especially when you're in a formal setting, you just can't use, you know, 4-letter words just anyhow you like. That was a learning curve for me as a very young man in the 80s. But I got through that.
Arthur or Joy, anything coming?
I think for me, one mistake that I did, and I think I still do it. I haven't changed it very much. It's calling people old, but old not to offend them, but in my culture is like, it's normal. When you hit 50, everyone say, well, I'm old. And it's so normal. And then I've made that, and then people don't like that. Yeah. In my culture, like being old, you are wise. But here is a sign of weakness, whereas in my own home is something good, that it makes you wiser, and it's a strength. So I think I've done that many times, and I have apologized, and I'm trying to explain them how it works, that it's not me trying to intimidate someone who is old, but it's these little things that it matters for others. So now I know that in my mind I have to think very carefully what to say. But then when I do that, is then when I make the mistake saying old.
You reminded me of a story there, Arta. When I went back to the country, we lived in Africa. We'd been away for 4 years, and a friend of mine who I hadn't seen yet since I'd been back saw me across the street, and he said, do you know what? I thought that was John, but I thought, whoa, that's John, but he's fat and old. And like you say, he wasn't being rude. He just meant, like, you've put on weight, you've grown up, you're looking like an older guy now, you're not a young man anymore. But for me, in English culture, that's just like, could you say anything ruder?
I know.
Yeah. Joy, have you got any examples for us?
I was rescued from being rude to somebody because my friend Kate had told me that in Namibia, she'd given something to somebody in her class, and he hadn't said thank you, and she'd pulled him up for it and said, you know, when you receive something, you're meant to say thank you. And he said, but no, miss. And the thing is, in November culture, you don't need to say thank you, because the way you take the thing is you take it in a certain way with a gesture, and that indicates thank you.
Yeah.
And I was so grateful that she told me, so that I then didn't say something to one of the other kids, because she'd already pre-warned me and said, they're not being rude, Joy. That's how they do it.
Yeah.
So thank you, Kate, you know?
Yeah. And that, again, Joy, you've led us into the next thing I wanted to talk about beautifully, because I found the same thing when I went to live overseas, that people didn't say please and thank you as much as we do in the UK. In fact, they hardly said it at all, but they would show their thanks and they would show the idea of please. So I actually stopped saying please and thank you as much. I kind of found that I had to adapt a little bit. So I was wondering for you guys, can you think of any adaptations, that you've made to kind of fit in to a new culture, a bit along the lines of what Joy was sharing there? Anything else that we do?
I think you need to be aware of details. You need to give yourself more room to understand things. This is a very funny one for me because I still remember it. I went into a kosher bakery in Whitechapel many years ago with a friend of mine. And I've never been into a kosher bakery. And he said to me, whatever you do, don't order pork. And I got there, the first thing I said was, can I have a sausage roll?
Oh,
because for me, I didn't distinguish sausage from pork at all, so yeah, that was something, that was ignorance on my side. But obviously I was being offensive by saying that, by asking for sausage roll.
Yeah.
It was very offensive because most people that work in kosher bakeries are Jew and they think you're making fun of their culture.
Yeah.
For me, I think, I'm trying to think, I grew up and then I remember mom always, she'll cook something and then she'll put a portion aside for someone who will knock on the door, or a relative or whoever they were that will come there so they have something to eat. Or really invite people, like come home and they'll come home. Coming here, I learned to have a diary and to invite people that I thought, wow, I need to write it down that someone is coming in a month or 2 months' time. And this is one thing that I have changed. I'm not saying that being spontaneous or planning ahead are colliding with each other, but I think this is one thing that I have learned here. I still like my spontaneous way of inviting people or someone coming in, knock on the door. I like that one, and just come in. But I have to adapt in those little tiny things that they are not the same.
Yeah.
If I go back home and I invite someone and I'll tell, well, come in 2 weeks' time, they'll say like, have you lost your mind? What is it today about, or the tomorrow one? Why in 2 weeks' time? But are those little things that they don't make it right or wrong, but they're good things to, to go along with them and to change and to try to understand the culture that we live in.
Joy, you've already shared about please and thank you, your story. Is there anything else that springs to mind, or shall we move on?
I think just it sort of taking on from Arta, really, it's this idea of inviting people in and that spontaneity. And in Sudan, I'd be walking down the street and total strangers would try and get me to come in. And I have to explain, I'm on my way to work, I can't just stop by. But I did think that was quite delightful. That people did feel that, oh, look, there's a stranger. I mean, because I'm obviously a stranger. We should invite her in and give her a cup of tea and try and look after her. What a different attitude to strangers.
Yeah.
And how wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So sadly though, we have to talk about negative things as well, because sometimes if we live in a different culture, maybe it's the one we've grown up in for a while, there can also be negative experience we go through. We come up against people who clearly think that their culture is king, and they belittle maybe our culture or aspects of our culture. Or sometimes we even find ourselves excluded because of where we come from, how we talk, how we behave as an outsider. It's kind of a, you're not from here, so you don't get it, so you can't do it kind of attitude, which is obviously getting quite close now to a racist kind of an attitude. I wonder if we have any of those kind of stories that we could share, of sadder stories maybe, of when that's happened to us, either here in the UK or maybe overseas. People are not, don't want to offer up those stories as quickly as the other ones. It's not as nice to talk about, is it? Have we got any examples?
I mean, a couple of times, either, you know, when I've been in Brunei or Namibia or Sudan, yeah, that there are times I've made a suggestion. I realize it's coming from a sort of Western liberal view of education or lots of other things. And people have sort of said, yeah, but that doesn't work here, Joy, because, you know, this is Sudan, or this is Brunei, or this is Namibia. And you do have, that's where you have to question, okay, am I just trying to import a Western view, or is this values that I'm trying to promote? A girl was doing really well in maths, but because she was a girl in Namibia, they weren't trying to get her to do the higher level of maths exam that she could have done. And I just thought, no, that my wanting this girl to be given the best chance, yes, I've come from a Western background for that, but I don't think I'm pushing something that's inherently wrong by wanting Mary to have a chance at the better exam.
Yeah.
But I was kind of viewed as being like, yeah, but you're just bringing in your white views. I don't think so.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Hi.
I've had experiences at work, in the world of work, that have made it very difficult for me to do my job properly, because people sort of look at you and they just write you off. And so, for example, I was running a one-stop shop in Newham Council, and somebody was not happy with the service they received, and they said they wanted to speak to the manager. And somebody came to get me, and I said, and I came out to say, oh, how can I help you? And he said, you're not the manager. And I said, I am the manager. And said, you can't be the manager. And I had to deal with that situation, you know, because it's I think I don't fit into the stereotype of that person. And I had a similar experience when I was running my own business, and somebody was complaining about the service and wanted to see the manager, and I came out to see them, and they said, you can't be the manager. So you have to deal with situations like that. And sometimes it can be very difficult, you know, but yeah, I get that.
Arta, do you have any examples that come to mind, or?
I'm trying to think of, I think I will skip this one.
Okay, that's okay. I can share one example from my own experience. It sounds like a silly example in some ways it is, but when I was in Africa, I played football with a big group of people on a Saturday morning, and most of them were from Madagascar. And the coach had to leave. He was an older man from Madagascar. He had to leave, and before he left, he asked me if I would run it. And I was a little bit hesitant, because you don't want to be, you know, the only white man who's there who runs something. But I thought, well, I am actually the next oldest, and I do know what I'm doing with this. So yeah, I'll do it. But then just a few weeks after that, I had to ban someone from playing because he basically assaulted someone. And when he came the next week, he refused to leave. He said he was going to play. And then he said to me, to my face, you can't tell me what to do. This is not where you're from. I'm doing a translation. But he basically made it very clear to me that he rejected my authority as the football coach on the basis of my cultural identity. Nothing to do with me as a coach, nothing to do with me as, you know, just because I wasn't from where he was from, I had no right to run the football training. And it was a very, very small window, I thought, into the kind of thing that Bio has just shared there, of what people have to deal with. Just being rejected because of their culture, because of sometimes just simply the color of their skin. Yeah, so it does happen, doesn't it? Yeah, cultural superiority, thinking that we're better because of where we come from. Let's maybe then, if there's no other experiences to share there, maybe we can go directly to talking about the church now. So first of all, could we share any positive examples that we have of where the church family has recognized or adapted to or celebrated different cultures, maybe where others have made an effort to show that our culture is welcomed, that people like us from our culture are welcomed and valued? Who would like to start with that?
Yeah, the Day of Pentecost celebration. So the last week we had Dave Banton. He introduced this Day of Pentecost meal initiative where everybody was encouraged to bring the meals that reflect their culture.
Mm.
And what was so brilliant about it is that you got to sample, first of all, because I like food, you get to sample meals from different cultures, and you realize how similar they are to yours.
Yeah.
And there's not a lot of the similarity in the different meals, and it just brings you more appreciation and awareness of different cultures. So I think that's quite good the way the church did it.
Mm.
Yeah, can I share that in Sudan, I went along to a church, it was mostly southern Sudanese. So the predominant culture in the place I was northern Sudanese, more Arab, Muslim, but there was very much a sort of quite a deprived group of people, southern Sudanese, who had a church. And they really didn't speak much English at all. But every week, the minister would ask me to do the reading in English. And I was the only one that understood English. But he did it just as a way of trying to make sure that I felt part of it.
Oh, that's
And I didn't understand any of the rest of the service, but I loved it in terms of the singing was great. And everybody was delighted for me to be there. And they didn't all just fall asleep when I was reading in English, even though they didn't understand a word. And what a lovely thing to do, really.
Yeah, and that was directly honouring you, wasn't it, Joy? Your culture and you, really.
It was very lovely.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Arthur, have you got anything?
I cannot speak about the church at St. Peter's because we didn't spend lots of time because of the lockdown, but I did, they have this, we had a day before the lockdown, a Sunday that we shared the international meal, that different cultures, they represent their own meals, and that was lovely. I haven't seen it as like the churches to do this for individuals or for culture in different, to see something that I can say, this is the way to do it. I don't know what is in my mind, but I think individuals, they have done it to me, but not, yeah, I haven't come across of something more concrete to say. I'm sad about that.
It's okay. Okay. So maybe from what you did say though, Arthur, you said on an individual level.
Yeah.
That's what I'd like to hear about as well. Can
Yeah.
you think of not necessarily big things that the church has done or something which has been organized by the church, but just when people have shown, oh, okay, you know, I recognize that there is a certain amount of difference here and I value that difference and I want to celebrate that or adapt.
Yes, they have done. I've been invited when people have made food from my, yeah, either lamb or different dishes that they know that I like, and we appreciate those very much. And it's lovely, or people asking, yeah, about my culture, but I can count them, a few of them. So I would like to see that in a more, not for me as a person, as Arta, because I'm easily adapted to a new culture and I like that. So I don't miss it very much, but I know that friends that they suffer quite a lot, that they feel like the fish out of water when there is not that, yeah. Yes. Sometimes the churches can be a nice place to be, but sometimes it's a lonely place to be. Yeah, it depends, and usually for a stranger, someone from different countries, I think, yeah, I would like to see more of that.
You said as well, taking the time to ask about culture and home and those kind of valuing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's important that you get closer to people, as I was saying. You get to know people, especially from different cultures, because we do tend to build up stereotypes in our minds, which obviously could have been influenced by the media, by what goes on TV or at the cinema. You know, they sort of depict different cultures in a certain way, and that builds up your sort of stereotype thinking or your understanding. But when you get closer to people, you get to actually understand and appreciate them. and appreciate their culture as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's pretty important that people do that.
Yeah.
Food is always very good, and I think when people invite you for a meal from a different culture, to try and engage, because you probably find that you enjoy the food, you enjoy the experience, you enjoy the company, and you actually get to understand them better and understand yourself as well, where you're coming from.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. So I'm just going to read a verse from the Bible now as we continue to think about church and how this kind of cultural give and take is a positive opportunity for us, but we're going to think about maybe what we can do differently as well. So this is Colossians chapter 3 verse 11 says this: here in the church, here there is not Greek or Jew, circumcised and uncircumcised, barbarian and Scythian, slave and free, but Christ is all and in all. So the church is a special place, isn't it? Or rather, it's a special gathering of people. It's a place of diversity of cultures, ethnic groups, all united in Christ, all together new creations in Christ, but still the same people they were before coming to Christ in terms of their language and in terms of their cultural background. So we have in the church unity in our diversity. That's the biblical model, and that's our aim, unity in diversity. So in the context of what we've been talking about, I wonder, can we think about now for a few minutes, how could we do this better? And at this stage, I'm not asking for ideas of new programs or new ministries, but on a personal level, a personal interactions level, how could we do this better? How can we get better at recognizing cultural bias, for example, and how can we develop more cultural sensitivity towards each other? That was a lot in that questionnaire, but I wonder, has anyone got something they'd like to share as we start thinking about that?
I think as individuals, we always have to look to Christ and to see the way he's actually handled, when he came as a man, he handled the different kinds of people, different cultures. Talking to the woman at the well and, breaching barriers, cultural barriers there with that act of talking to that woman. The parables he gave as well. I think it's important to look to him because that way you start to understand the importance of our diversity, because we can't see the big picture, so we don't know where all this is going to. Well, we all hope we all end up in heaven, but we don't know why we're so diverse or we're so different, but we know we were created by God. And for that reason, we need to be looking to Christ to understand things better. It will help in the way we approach people and how we can actually empathize with people from our own experiences to understand their own experiences as well. Obviously, we need to be listening to the word regularly and listening to what God is trying to tell us, because he does talk to us. I think it's very, very important to hold on to our faith seriously, because that is actually what will be the key that unlocks a lot of the mysteries and some of the challenges we'll come across. Sorry, I'm coming across as a preacher. I'm not meant to be.
Preach.
But I think that is actually where we need to be looking at. That's the way we should be going.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I can add to all of this and say, as a church, yes, we have these different cultures that we come together, but the church is our home and is a place where we belong and we share the same God and we worship the same God. And in my mind, as well as like Jesus came to bring those barriers down and to unite us, in my mind is the verse from Mark chapter 3, when they says the disciples tell Jesus, your mother is here and your brothers, and Jesus turned and said, who is my mother and my brothers, the one who does they listen to God, and they do God's will. And for me is that, who is my brother, and where is my family, and where is my culture? I'm not saying that the diversity in culture should be banned at all, but is that being united and family for me, that I don't have my immediate family here. The church family takes a literal meaning. That's my family. These are the people that helps me, and these are the people that cries with me and share my burdens or my joys, or I'm disciplined by them. I belong there. I belong in that. Not only as a stranger in a stranger land, but even if I was from England and I became a Christian, my views will differ from my family. So the church is the place where I belong. Is a new culture, without saying that we should ban all our cultural habits and this and that, but it's kind of accepting and being one. It's a beautiful picture to see how God's put us together, and we are on those places where God wants us for now to be, for a purpose, either for us or for others. That is a beautiful place to be. I can say that the way to help each other through that, or to be sensitive, is like to spend time with each other, to ask questions, and to make mistakes. By making mistakes, God knows the motives of our hearts. Perhaps sometimes we will say the wrong thing because we don't fit culturally, but hey, it's okay. Through making mistakes, we learn. If those mistakes are made because I want to get to know you better, then it's okay. God knows the motives of our hearts. And this is how by spending time, by asking questions, by sharing our lives with each other, we have to challenge our comfort zones, because it's a beauty there. It's a blessing. It's not a sacrifice, but to share our lives, to eat a meal together, that hospitality is a beautiful thing. I mean, Jesus, he ate with everybody, didn't he? Well, I'm coming to your home. I want to have a meal. Is by sitting down and sharing a meal, then we get in that level to get to know each other. And to support and to love each other better in a Christ-like way.
If we do, I think Artie used the term of getting closer to each other, maybe it was bio, and if we do spend more quality time with each other, we do spend more time in each other's homes, for example, when we're allowed to. It's a beautiful thing, like you've been saying. However, there is then, if you're closer to someone, you're more likely to the culture's more likely to rub up, aren't they? Because people are more likely to relax, more likely to behave how they normally relax, rather than having those more surface level conversations that we sometimes have in passing. So there is also more opportunity to say something that might be taken the wrong way, or for cultural misunderstandings to happen as we get closer. So I wonder, can we think about that for a minute? How do we deal with that? How do we, what kind of attitudes should we be having to each other in those situations? And how can we relate to each other when cultural miscommunication does happen, or even offense? Sometimes it can cause offense because we don't really.
I think you're meant to fall down and to get up, because if you don't fall down, you will not build up your strength. You would keep thinking everything is in a linear format. You're meant to make mistakes and then learn from those mistakes, because they are the ways that you actually get to understand and appreciate things well and better. If you don't make mistakes, I mean, I'm not going to go into a kosher shop anyway anymore and ask for sausage roll, but I had to make that mistake. I had to make that mistake to learn what was right or wrong. I mean, I was told, whatever you do, don't ask for pork. So I think that what Christ wants us to do, and he will lift us up, is to fall and in a way sort of die to self, die to the way we sort of are structured from our cultures and where we're brought up. He wants us to die to self and in a way to be born again. I think there's a deep teaching there in terms of being born again. And what Asha said about who are my brothers, who are my mothers. These are my brother, this is my mother. It's so important because we always run about thinking these are the priorities, our cultures, our friends, our people, and all that. But we need to build up fellowship with God's people because those are our people. Mm. And chances are those are the people you're going to be spending eternity with. So know them now.
Amen.
And I guess I'll bring that to the culture. We shouldn't be polite, not in a way. No, I mean, if we feel that we are offended, I guess we can say it in a nice way. How did you say? Quite often I do that because I know myself that I'm going to say something that perhaps is going to hurt some, or my words that I use, the way I choose my words sometimes perhaps is not the right one. And then I'll leave the people that window, say, if you don't understand something, because perhaps I will make mistake, English is not my first language, please do come and ask me, why did I say, how did I say it? Or yeah, yeah, I mean, we can find ways if we want to, there are ways.
Yeah.
And I guess through pain, then yeah, there is love. We have to go through pain sometimes and make mistake, but learn how to deal with those and to admit that, yeah, I'm sorry. This is the way how Christ brings us together so we can grow. And perhaps, yeah, I'm trying to find the word. When we prune the trees, yeah. We don't cut the whole tree. Of course, yeah, are those little branches that they need to come down because they need to give fruit. But I guess it's the same with the relationship and the way we grow. We'll make mistakes, but we can go through them. If we have Christ in the center, then through forgiveness and talking, and yeah, I think there are ways to build.
Yeah, that's great. I think you're right, Arta. When I found for myself when I lived in a different culture, when you don't speak the language as fluently as your home language, I came across, and I know I did, much more blunt than I do in English. And sometimes you say things and you don't mean to, but you are rude, aren't you, within the culture, within the eyes of the people in the other culture. So I think one thing I would say is not assuming that the other person meant to say what you think they're saying.
Yeah.
Ask yourself, did they really mean that? I thought that was, I thought they were communicating such and such. But being patient with them, asking them if that's what they meant. And as I've heard someone say before, filling the space with grace. There's often a space in communication where someone says something and we assume they mean something else, but they might not have done. They might not have meant that. Yeah. But let's fill that space with grace and go, well, it seems like they could have meant this bad thing, but actually I'm going to assume they didn't. And I'm going to go to them and ask them and talk to them and see if there's cultural differences here maybe as well between us. Yeah. Yeah. Joy, have you got anything to add at this stage? It's been a while since we've come to you.
No, I mean, I do think Arta said it really beautifully, that as long as we're still trying and making the effort, we appreciate the intention behind what people are trying to do, or at least we should appreciate the intention behind and not react necessarily to the surface things. I think Bayo said earlier, it's all about communication and wanting to build those friendships. And as long as we do want to build the friendships, and as long as we're making the effort to build the friendships, the cultural things, there will be issues, but there's issues everywhere. I mean, I'm married to a black man. It's like there's cultural issues in our marriage. But that doesn't stop us adoring each other. It's absolutely fine that there are issues between people. That doesn't have to spoil anything. You just learn to communicate more.
Yeah. The marriage one is an interesting analogy because in a cross-cultural marriage, as soon as you know cross-cultural sticking point or something that's difficult, you can't just go, oh well, I'll leave that person then. But in church you might do. You might go, oh, that person, I found them a little bit abrupt, or I went to the house and it was very weird, so actually I won't do that again. You could easily do that, couldn't you? But you can't do that in marriage. Actually, in church, as we've been saying, we are part of a loving community, so that shouldn't be our attitude. It should be like a bit more like the marriage maybe, where we say, okay, I've come across this potential difficulty, or you know, we had an odd interaction, but I'm going to stick with it. I'm going to keep going because, you know, we are a multicultural family.
I had with Richard, I said something just a few days ago, actually. One of our children asked for something, and then I didn't say that on that time. But then when we were together on our own, I told him, "Oh, honey, please do not entertain that idea at all." And he said, "Why did you say that?" I didn't know. In my mind, entertain the idea was something not offensive, but do you know what I mean? Not pushy, not kind of, are you accusing me? I had to go to find my dictionary and, well, Google it and find the right idea. And then I was trying to tell him, but I didn't mean like that. And he said, I know you didn't, but think somebody else wouldn't think that deep. And you need to choose your, but again, you see, we have to speak because the other person, I know that they cannot read my mind, what is in my mind, how I said it, but that, hey, that's why we have a mouth to ask questions. Why did you say that? How did you say that? So unless we, yeah, I know that these things will exist, but for a good thing. I mean, if we don't go to that level that we can hurt each other, we will never change. We will never try to understand each other because it's the fear that keeps us back. Am I going to say the right thing? Am I going to offend someone? I mean, I cannot keep my mouth shut. I want to talk. I want to share with people. And I know there is going to be something that I'm going to hurt people. But yeah, we need to face those and we need to break those barriers and say that you hurt me. I make it easy and it's not easy, but we have to go to that level that, yes, we are going to hurt each other, but we're going to work it through.
Yeah. In the closeness of loving relationships.
Exactly.
Okay, guys, I think we'll wrap it up there soon, unless anyone has anything burning that they'd like to share as we close.
Thank you, John.
So, yeah, thank you, guys, and thank you for watching at home. As we've been saying, the gospel brings us together from all different cultures, all different backgrounds. We know, don't we, that God is not from the Aruba tribe in Nigeria or from Albania or even from England. But he has created us and created us all of our diversity, our cultural diversity. And it is a wonderful thing that we can be together in the church. So let's keep praying for God to reveal to us where we maybe do have a sense that our culture is the best, for us to repent of that, to learn, lovingly learn and get close to other people in our church and grow together in that unity and diversity that Christ has brought us into his church family to be part of. So thanks again for watching, and yeah, we'll see you again another time.
Bye, everyone.